They are designed, quite literally, to fail you and to just take your money and run. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today, we're talking about dating apps because I think there is a lot to say about them, not just because I've been there, you've been there, I feel like we've all been there, where dating apps are terrible and they suck the joy out of your life, but then you finally match with somebody and it's great and it's really fun, and then they disappear into the void after 2 messages, which is great for our attachment styles, but also because there's a lot of interesting research about what they're doing to our brains. So if dating apps make you feel like shit, or if you are having a really hard time with online dating, please know it's not you. The apps are quite literally designed to make us feel like shit. And the apps are fundamentally broken. So we're talking about that. We're going to talk about the psychological damage that they're doing to you, and also what to do if you're stuck in the swirling, flushing toilet that is online dating. Okay, I have some good things about the apps and bad things about the apps that we're going to talk about. Before we do that, though, if you're new here, hi, thanks for coming. You should subscribe. Okay, so I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk with you guys about some of the potential positives of dating apps and or like some of the caveats that are necessary for this. One of which being the prevalence, right? A lot of people talk about how they don't really like online dating, but because it's really the only way to meet people nowadays, you kind of just like can't avoid it. So that's very valid and I think important for us to honor in this conversation. If you use dating apps, this is not a judgment about you using them. And to a degree, it's almost like a necessity, right? I do think, for what it's worth, there is kind of like a chicken or the egg situation happening here that we're going to get into later, but I wanted to acknowledge that up front. And then also there's an accessibility aspect to this, right? For people who have disabilities, social anxieties, other barriers to dating in like the quote unquote traditional sense, app-based and online dating offers sort of an accessibility there that is really important. And I think it's really necessary. So there is a need that's being met by these apps. So like, fair enough, right? For what it's worth also though, the percentage of people who are using online dating because of social anxiety or disability or things like that is not particularly high based on the research that we have. So I don't think that is enough of a reason to say that we should just not evaluate or judge online or app-based dating at all, because there are very much some real problems with app-based and online dating. Okay, before I tell you about some of the negatives about online dating, I want to talk to you about something that I absolutely love, which is Beducated. If you've been here for any length of time, you will know that I'm a big fanboy of Beducated, and it's because they're great. If you don't know, Beducated is an online platform that is dedicated to all things sex and relationship learning. And not just that, they have over 100 courses that are taught by industry experts, filled with reliable and safe information. And I think if I have a boner for anything in this world, it's fact-based and reliable information. So big fans of Beducated around here. You might not know this actually, but May is in fact International Masturbation Month, which is incredible. We talk all the time on this channel about masturbating, admittedly, but also about destigmatizing self-pleasure and how important it is to feel empowered and at home in our bodies, and how to bring them pleasure that is uniquely for ourselves, which if you are anything like me, you might have grown up in a home or in a religion or a culture that was not cool with that. And so as an adult, I've struggled with some trauma around that and some shame, like internalized shame about masturbating and sex and pleasure. So I have been using the Self-Pleasure Journey course as a way to sort of back to basics in destigmatizing self-pleasure and masturbation, and I love it. Definitely recommend. So I'm very excited that Beducated has given me a special code for all of my followers. You can use the code Mickey Atkins to get 60% off of the annual pass, which is 10% more than their already existing discount code. Shout out. Thank you very much, Beducated. So go click the link in the description. Make sure that you get your 60% off of the annual pass. They also have a 14-day money-back guarantee, which is super cool. So go check it out. Show Beducated some love. Show yourself some love. Lots of love this month. And thank you again to Beducated for sponsoring this week's video. Let's go ahead and hop back in. Okay, now that I have given you some very brief caveats and positives about dating apps, I want to talk to you about the negative things, because there are a lot. The first thing that I want to talk about, though, is that they can become compulsive, right? Especially for those of us that have ADHD, neurodivergency, or your dopamine reward system is sort of broken, like a lot of folks who have ADHD are. Dating apps especially pose a little bit of a risk in terms of developing a compulsive behavior because it exploits the reward system in your brain. Not on accident, to be clear, they're designed this way. It is quite literally a slot machine, right? Like in the worst and realist type of way where you like keep pressing the button for the pretty lights and then just you're disappointed by the end result. Very much what we're talking about with dating apps. There is a lot of, well, not a lot, but a fair amount of research that sort of explores why this is and how this actually happens in the brain. And what we've found is that the swiping behavior is relatively low risk, but potentially high reward, right? As far as a dopamine payout is concerned, the feeling of like, it's a match, right? That's a very dopamine rich experience. And also for what it's worth, it doesn't even have to be getting a match for you to have the dopamine payout. Sometimes just the anticipation of a potential match is enough to sort of pull you back into the app and to keep you swiping, which obviously I don't think it needs to be said. This is a problem, not just because it fucks with your brain, but also because it's like a time suck, right? And then there is the dopamine cliff, right, where we don't get a match or we have a perceived rejection and then we feel like shit about ourselves, which is a great segue for us to talk about the self-esteem issues that are a potential risk for dating apps, because we've found in the research actually that, I mean, just like regular social media, it's a well-documented phenomenon in social media, in case you didn't know. Being chronically online, we talked about that in a video, I'll put it up here. Being chronically online or sort of compulsively, regularly engaging with dating apps in this case is an inherent risk to your self-esteem. One of the things that was logged in some of the research that I looked at is that it's very common for users to compare themselves to potential partners, right? This is like, I think the obvious one where people will go through the app, we're swiping, and then comparing ourselves to these people by saying like, are we in the same league, right? Is this person too hot for me to swipe on, or, are they too good for me or whatever? We're comparing ourselves not just in physical appearance, though, to be clear. There is also the perceived popularity of this person, right? Do they have photos on their dating app profile of them with a bunch of people or like at a party or, with family and things like that? And does that make us feel inferior, right? We're comparing that to the way that our own actual life looks like based on their very cultivated and carefully selected profile. We also compare our perceived wealth as well. Things like fancy cars and bags and clothes and, going out and all of these behaviors and things that are associated with a high level of wealth. We compare ourselves in that way. And so that can be associated with this phenomenon where not only are we then going to just kind of feel like shit about ourselves, but we also tend to participate in this behavior where we don't swipe on those people because we think that they're out of our league. And that makes people more likely to settle actually for partners that they don't really like that much, that don't make them feel good about themselves, but because we feel like that's what we deserve, we tend to not swipe on people that we want to be with if they have things that make us feel bad, and rather swipe on people who are like a low risk, like less than what we deserve. I don't know why I did air quotes around that, less than what we deserve kind of person. And so again, it becomes this sort of shitty cyclical thing. For what it's worth, dating apps also, because they're associated with this sort of endless swiping behavior, that behavior of like swiping on a lot of profiles is correlated with a decrease in self-esteem, as opposed to people who swipe on only a few profiles at a time. The swiping tends to make you feel like shit about yourself. And honestly, as a clinician, I hear this all the time. People will say in trying to find somebody or trying to meet somebody on a dating app, like maybe my standards are too high, right? Maybe I'm just like a picky person. After they have been rejected by somebody named Kyle who listed crypto bro as a personality trait. And that's not true, right? That's not the case. It fucks with your brain. Even as a person, you can be relatively well adjusted, but this behavior of sort of constantly swiping, constantly being rejected, constantly comparing yourselves to others makes you feel like garbage. And it's generally speaking, not a healthy behavior for you to be engaging in for a long period of time. Okay, speaking of the endless swiping and like the never ending fucking list of people on these apps, the sheer volume of people on these apps can lead to a paralysis and an anxiety, right? It's overwhelming, the experience of like, wow, there's just like a never ending amount of fucking people on here. And so for those of us that are, the people who, like for me, I know even for something simple like trying to buy an Apple Watch band, I have to look through every single page of product results before I can make a decision about what the best item is. And so for things like dating apps where there is quite literally a never ending amount of people, especially if you're bisexual or pansexual, it just makes it so much worse. There's just never ending amounts of people. And so that can feel very overwhelming because it's kind of the feeling that you can't know whether you're making the right choice, or how do you really evaluate whether somebody's a good match for you or a bad match for you based on photos and a very brief, sometimes no, bio that people put in their profile. It can feel very unattainable, right? This idea of like making the right choice. The sort of funny thing about this, it's not like funny, haha, but like funny in a sort of, kind of way, is that oftentimes people who have a fear about a scarcity, girl, get it together. Oftentimes people who have a fear of scarcity of partners in real life, that will sort of push them to become involved with app-based dating, which then, you're overwhelmed with the sheer number of people on there. And then that can lead to an anxiety about there being too many people, right? This can often lead to anxiety for folks because the fear is like, well, what if I make the wrong choice, right? What if this person's the one? But because, I'm a shallow asshole who doesn't think that this person is hot, then, what if I don't swipe on them and then I regret it, right? What if I pass by my destiny? This is all very overwhelming, right? Especially for those of us that are perfectionists, overanalyzers, very detail-oriented people. Dating apps are a hellhole because we try to come up with like some kind of fucking system or like rubric, and it never works. There's never a good way to do it, really. There's an endless number of variables and things like that. And so it starts to become this very anxiety-inducing experience of trying to have some sort of rationale or reason, never really being able to do that effectively, and then just feeling downtrodden and overwhelmed and frustrated. And that sort of creates this like paradoxical loneliness, right? Even though we're on this app that in theory is meant to be a social experience and it's meant to be a vehicle for connection, we feel more alone than we ever have because we're surrounded by all of these people. None of them are swiping on me. I'm not getting any matches. All the conversations I'm having fucking blow, and nothing is working out the way that I wanted to. And so, wow, maybe I am going to die alone, right? This experience on a dating app is very, very frustrating and anxiety inducing. And I don't think it needs to be said that this is really bad for your mental health. Okay, so that leads us to the portion in our presentation where we talk about the fact that dating apps do very much prey on this fear that you have, right? Once you've had this experience of trying to like swipe the normal way, and it's not working out good, we're at an all-time low, things are feeling very bad. We are now starting to think like, well, maybe Tinder Platinum is kind of worth it, right? Sure, it's like $70 a month, but maybe that's worth it. No, don't do that. Like, please, if you take nothing else away from this fucking video, don't pay for that shit. Not just because it's useless, but also because it's literally a scam, right? Dating apps are designed to keep you on them because if you fall in love and get married and never come back, they don't make any money. They don't make money from that. And so it's very much an industry that is designed to keep you stuck and to keep you sort of coming back and paying more and more money to try to like game the system, right? Don't do that. It's not worth it. Tinder Platinum and Bumble Premium and all of these things, they are just designed to keep you on the app and to waste your money. For what it's worth, also, this can be especially problematic and dangerous for folks who are in transitional periods of life. So if you are a person who's between the ages of like 18 to 25, if you're under 18, you better not be on this channel. Love you very much, but this is not for people under 18. But 18 to 25, like that demo, you are still very much in a period of time where your brain is continuing to develop and starting to move into adulthood rather than adolescence. And that period of time is very dangerous for you to be involved with things like dating apps, oddly enough, because they can, first of all, break your dopamine reward system, like we talked about earlier, but also because an overexposure to judgment and comparison and the excessive dopamine, all of that can actually hinder your development, right? So when we talk about somebody being able to sort of develop into their best selves and their most emotionally stable and their most well-adjusted selves, dating apps very much pose a risk in that regard because they can fuck with the way that your brain is developing, which can lead to problems down the line, right? generally speaking, we want to discourage people from engaging in behaviors that are going to fuck with your psychology and your brain physiology, because you're still in a sort of moldable, malleable phase of life. And really, that's just not, I don't think it needs to be justified. It's not good. It's not good for your brain. Speaking of which, for those of us that are socially anxious, or if you have diagnosed social anxiety, avoiding those in real life interactions, right? Trying to find somebody or date somebody by meeting them. I don't know. How do people meet people at a bar? Whatever. Hi, I'm married and painfully single otherwise. For those of us that are socially anxious, avoiding those in real life interactions because we're anxious about them can actually make you more anxious later on, because it's a lack of skill development. I want to be very clear that avoiding those things that make you anxious, or avoiding situations that provoke your social anxiety, is not an accessibility thing, right? That's enabling you. That is actually continuing to make the problem worse, because we're lacking the skill development that's needed to make you feel confident to engage in those social situations. The answer to dealing with social anxiety is not to throw somebody into the deep end and say, like, deal with it, right? But it is necessary and possible to confront those fears in a way that's like moderated and like slow and safe, right? But still confronting the fears nonetheless, so that you're not continuing to be terrified of this thing that ultimately, ostensibly, if you're on a dating app, you want to be doing. The other thing about this too that is important to note is that when we have this opportunity to sort of present our very cultivated and pre-planned version of ourselves to other people, that can feel good in the moment, right? But again, it does sort of limit you in terms of your ability to engage in person. I feel like a lot of people have had this experience where you have great banter with somebody through your app messages and stuff, right? Your initial talking phase is like super fun and flirty, and there's a lot of banter, and it's like funny and cool. And then you go on your first date with this person and it just falls flat, right? Oftentimes this is because you're like dating that person and their group chat, right? You're dating that person. I have heard of people asking ChatGPT for advice about how to respond to message. Mostly it's men responding to women. Ask ChatGPT about how to respond to messages, right? And so again, there is an accessibility aspect to this, and ultimately developing the skills to engage effectively with somebody in real life and in real time is a very important skill for us to have, and something that we're not going to do if we are continuing to avoid the situation in the first place. Speaking of skill development, by the way, I want to remind you that there is a link in the description for 60% off of Beducated's annual membership if you use my code Mickey Atkins, which is a great deal. And so if you want to spend May masturbating your life away, then I think you should do that. Maybe don't masturbate your life away, but masturbate for fun and joy. Don't forget to click that link. Thanks, Beducated. Love you. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the more obvious risks of online dating as well. I don't think anybody is surprised by the phenomenon of like catfishing at this point. Hopefully, there's a whole TV show about it. It's a really problematic thing. I do think it's kind of been reduced to a bit of a meme when it is actually a very serious and traumatizing issue. And along with that are things like abuse and manipulation that can happen on these apps as well, because people are able to hide behind a photo and in these messages where you're not having to engage through voice chat or through video chat, right? There is also a much less talked about issue here, which is that there is a big potential for trauma and manipulation and abuse for people who are BIPOC, queer, disabled, other marginalized people, especially because there is a unique risk for fetishization. I never say this word correctly. Fetishization there. Transphobia, racism, fat phobia, all of those things can be associated with engaging in dating apps and online dating. It does kind of put a sort of strange, it does sort of create a strange opportunity. I guess that's a bad word, but like it does kind of create a strange environment where folks who have ill intent can more easily access folks that they are trying to fetishize, or folks that they view as easier to manipulate or to abuse and things like that. So even things like microaggressions in conversations and messages on these apps can really take a toll. And so the risk there is pretty concerning. I don't think it needs to be said that that's obviously bad for your mental health, but also can create a problem in our ability to feel safe and to trust other people in developing relationships, right? surviving this type of experience for like your whole life, for example, will really do a number on somebody and their willingness and their desire to be trusting and to be vulnerable with people. And app-based dating creates a sort of trauma soup in that regard. Okay, so now that I've been an effective, real bummer about that, I think it sort of poses the question like, well, what the fuck is the alternative? Therapy lady. And the answer is, first of all, to work on yourself, right? To be a resilient person who has a healthy sense of self-esteem, a fleshed out social circle that you are very trusting and checked in with will create like a sort of protective barrier against things like the tendency to compare yourself to others, to the loneliness that can happen on these apps, and also the manipulation and the potential abuse there, right? Especially having a social connectedness, right? If you have dopamine sources that are pretty well diversified, that is also going to mean that you are less likely to use these apps as a slot machine, especially because, right, like the endless swiping is, like we said, it's low risk and potential high reward. And it's common, actually, in the research we have found that sometimes folks will swipe and swipe and swipe and never engage with somebody, right? I can't get rejected if I never talk to anybody. And so having a fleshed out social circle that you feel very connected to, that you feel very grounded in, that bolsters your self-esteem, is going to reduce the likelihood that you're playing the slot machine on Tinder or Bumble or whatever. It means that you're more likely to use the app for its like quote unquote intended purpose by swiping on a few people, if you match with them, to share a few messages and to sort of in a moderated and metered way, see where that goes. For what it's worth, also, I want to encourage people to set limits around these apps. It's also very common for people to sort of doom scroll on these apps, right? And also to use them as a response to emotional upset. Because the dopamine is there as a reward system, people will use them when they've had a bad day to kind of like uplift their self-esteem. And that's not great, right? We don't want to be using it as a dopamine sort of input-output machine. And also try not to hyperanalyze and to do the thing where we're pretending to be like an oracle about the future, right? Don't do the thing where you tell yourself, I should have swiped, is it left or right? Girl, I don't know.
Left is bad.
Left is bad. So if you swipe, Jesus Christ, if I had swiped right on that person, then maybe that was like my soulmate TM, right? Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Sometimes people find peace in this sort of like cliche or proverb that like you can't fuck up anything that's meant for you, right? I don't know if I really believe that, but taking a perspective, a position that ultimately you can't go back and undo those things, right? And that it's not our job to try to intuit the perfectly right choice in every single circumstance forever can go a long way in helping to unlearn some of that anxiety. I also want to encourage you to try to get out there, right? I know that it's really scary and it can be very uncomfortable, right? However, the improved social skills that you're going to gain as the natural process, like just through virtue of the fact that you're doing the damn thing, the skill development of like socially engaging with other people and with strangers is going to go a long way in your confidence to do that and to be more comfortable doing that, which is going to be correlated with improved outcomes as far as making new friends, meeting new people, potentially meeting a partner, if that's something that you're interested in. For what it's worth, also, I think a greater social consciousness about wanting to get off the apps and to be more out in the community could mean moving away from the apps altogether and make them less prevalent, right? They could lessen our reliance on them as the only means of dating. Also, as a final warning, I do just, again, please don't pay for those fucking features. Don't pay for the memberships. Don't, $70 a month, $60, whatever. That's cuckoo bananas behavior. Don't pay for those things. If you pay for them, this is not judgment, but I am telling you, it is going to waste your money. Like those features are not going to actually provide you with better odds of finding a partner. They are designed quite literally to fail you and to just take your money and run. So don't pay for them. Really try to avoid doing that because it's not going to help you in any meaningful way. So I know that app-based dating is a little bit of a bummer. It feels really bad sometimes. As a person who like is married but is also polyamorous, I see you. It is hard out in these streets. Big love to you if you are on dating apps and things like that because, like I said, it makes you feel like shit about yourself and it can feel very isolating and alone. However, if you're here, thankfully, you are part of a wonderful community of people who are probably a whole lot like you. We have sort of a strange collection of lovely little weirdos who tend to be queer and neurodivergent and have lots of intersecting identities, which I think is wonderful. So for what it's worth, also as a shameless plug, if you want to join our community, you can join at the $5 or above level here on YouTube or on Patreon, and come hang out with us on Discord, not as a dating service, but simply as good, platonic, wholesome fun. So don't forget to click that link in the description for Beducated as well. Thank you very much for our sponsorship this month. And if you like the video, you should do that. It's just generally nice. You can also subscribe if you want to hang out here more. I'd love to have you stay. And then you can share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.